Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the musician, multi-instrumentalist and producer from Birmingham. It's the one and only Justin K Broadrick, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in a lot of bands: Godflesh, Jesu, Napalm Death, Head of David, and there's lots more besides. But anyway, this is the interview, so you're going to find out more about Justin's amazing life and musical journey and much, much more. Just to say, once or twice the connection froze and then didn't freeze. So yes, there might be a few technical moments, not a lot, and I've tried to sort out one or two. But yes, it just adds to the quality. But after several minutes of interesting but casual chat about this and that, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. Justin, it's over to you.
It's all down to my mum and my stepdad, really, essentially, who were... try and cut that one down. Okay, my stepdad was a guitarist, a very learned, equipped, skilled guitarist, a very quiet man until he drank. And coincidentally, my dad, my actual father, was also in the same band, who was a bass player. But I never saw my dad after he was 2 until I was about 21 or something. That was down to he was 17 when I was born. My mum was 23. And my actual dad was basically a heroin addict within 2 years. I don't blame him, he was bringing me up. But yeah, that was pretty much the end of him for X amount of years. But he's somewhat of a very skilled survivor.
Yes.
Became a very successful man, basically, in many contexts, but whatever. Anyway, my mom was central to some of these players in bands. This is like, Council Estate, Birmingham bands, So what it was is my stepdad was a guitarist in a band, a sort of, they were quite a well-known, dare I say, hippie band in a very early 70s called
Maniac.
Nice.
What were they called?
Maniac.
Did they ever release any material?
No, they supported people like Arthur Brown, Camel. They were like a bit of a band that would end up supporting many people in and out of Birmingham, but they never really found much success. My mom actually did a theatrical performance with them, inspired by Alice Cooper, by early Alice Cooper, which was my stepdad would drop his guitar and cut a baby out of her stomach. Which was quite like nasty for the time, it was 73 or something like that, but really like a product of Alice Cooper's horror show at the time,
Yes.
And that was an album I was obsessed with, was Killer,
Yes.
Killer by Alice Cooper. That was always omnipresent in the Council Estate flat above the Spa in a shithole called Shard End in Birmingham, But it was, as you can imagine, that scene was crazy. It was all parties, drinks, drugs, everything. Council Estate, drinking and drugs. My first 4 years, I was brought up in a hippie commune, a genuine.
Yes,
commune.
Well, I'm sort of fascinated because I sort of later on in life have become quite into that kind of new age hippie world and known various communities and different scenes and lots of the healing world and dance world of hippiedom. Yeah. So you were brought up in a community, a commune as they called it, and this was in Birmingham, was it?
Yeah, this was. I think initially it was around one of the more trendy, more art, music-based areas of Birmingham, like Moseley, which is a very famous part of Birmingham. In fact, Ocean Colour Scene, of all people, had that Moseley Shoals album.
Oh yes.
And Godflesh actually, one of the flats Godflesh lived when me and Ben Green from Godflesh first got together and lived in a flat. The upstairs was the Ocean Colour scene band, the Fanatics. Like two of them lived up there, and the downstairs was John Peel's favourite, the Nightingales.
Rob Lloyd.
There you go. But Robert, he didn't live there, but it was the drummer and Pete Tank. You know this guy? They had a band called Rumblefish just after, and they used to rehearse downstairs. Pete is now in the Membranes with good old John Robb.
Right. God, I've come across Rumblefish, not just the film, but there was also a band, wasn't there, Rumblefish?
Oh, yeah. It's a post Pete Tank, the guitarist in the Nightingales. It was a post Nightingales band. They I don't even know if they actually did go as far as a Peel session. I can't remember. Very Birmingham thing, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But then upstairs, was the Fanatics, which was like two guys that didn't end up actually in Ocean Colour scene. He ended up, one did and one didn't. But they, Moseley Shoals, and basically Moseley was like the place to live in Birmingham if you came from like the peripheral sort of council estates, or maybe if you came from a money background, you would still end up in Moseley, you'd go to the local pub there, and it was like UB40 and Fine Young Cannibals and various artists and various.
Oh, you've just broken up a bit there. Your connection just went a bit sort of sticky. Do you want to just say that again? It's gone completely sticky.
I was probably still warbling on about Moseley, I think, that area of Birmingham. Maybe, I don't know if I continued about like the local pubs there would be like UB40 and Fine Young Cannibals drinking in there, and it was a very sort of, real music thrivey sort of, a bit like maybe what Notting Hill was like at one point, with the punk scene maybe, and a bit of. But yeah, I mean that was where we eventually.
So that
was.
I was going to say, there was that kind of, there's an estate in Manchester called Hume, which was kind of this big place that, was going to get.
Yeah, I stayed there loads.
And that was kind of became a bit of for a very short time, as I would imagine, was a very creative period, and then it probably gets a bit messy. But where was this community? I can't imagine a community, because mostly these are sort of from East Anglia. They're in sort of wild countryside, down sort of farm tracks, and these houses that quite large houses that suddenly 10 people live in, and it all goes terribly well for sort of a few months, and then it all goes terribly wrong during the winter period.
Yeah.
So where was this in where was this in Birmingham, by the way?
Oh, the commune I was initially raised in.
Yes.
Yeah, it was in this. It was on the periphery, I think, of this same area, Moseley, which parts of that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there was, this is essentially a very council estate hippie scene. This is people, on the dole and literally couldn't make it into art school. You know what I mean? Or didn't have a money background, or didn't. There was people with money backgrounds thinking and out, but most distinctly, my mom and my stepdad Rob were very, very council estate. So it's pretty much like that. It was.
And during that period, there was a lot of people following gurus, weren't there? There was a lot of guru sort of fashion and spiritual kind of things that people were trying to explore. They didn't do that?
No, this was definitely more like people fucked out their head and picking up cups of blood off the floor from people shooting up and
right.
Like more, rough. I mean, this weren't like anything remotely gentrified in any regard. But for want of maybe about, this is pretty.
I was romanticising this flower power generation, but it wasn't, was it?
No, it absolutely wasn't. It was actually pretty damn brutal. I think there's something quite attractive about that angle. I think almost like the way Americana was. Like the Summer of Love becoming this sort of like, and Altamont being like a symbol of the, the end of it, and the Stones and the bikers and all this sort of thing. I really love that about when I was in Head of David. You interviewed Ruben, didn't you, Stephen Burrows?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and I listened to all of that.
Did you? I can't. To be honest, things like that is quite a long time ago, and I can't.
It was. Yeah, I think at least maybe 3 years.
Possibly,
think.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the details might be sketchy in my brain actually, but yeah, I did manage to do an interview with him, which was really lovely.
But that was, I was in, Head of David for, an amount of time. And I was really attracted to that angle of, when hippiedom went wrong, when it got brutal, like the Manson thing.
Yes, well, the Manson thing was quite interesting. I don't know if you ever heard any of his kind of solo music career, but he was quite.
Yes, ceased to exist. The song ceased to exist. Yeah, I got into it through Robin Gristle and Whitehouse, when I was a kid.
Yes.
And then the first second annual report from Gristle, the B-side after Cease to Exist, that the film, and definitely. I know the album pretty damn well as well. I got like when I was about 13, I discovered 12, 13 when I discovered Throbbing Gristle, and industrial music generally. I became really very obsessive about the subject matter, and particularly coming from a really industrial city as well. I really felt I could connect with this industrial music,
Yes, well, quite.
And it was presented to me in the rag market in Birmingham by a guy who thought he was being really subversive since he was about 22 and thought he was going to play this 13-year-old Throbbing Gristle and shock the living shit out of me, considering I was also buying Killing Joke bootlegs and things like that. I was really inquisitive as to Throbbing Gristle because I saw the imagery before I even heard the music, and the imagery really hit me about what I live around.
Yes.
Which, when referencing like the environment to other kids at school, I might as well have been talking an alien language. It was just like, do you feel the factories? Do you smell this? Do you hear it? Be like, fuck, are you talking about? Be like, oh, so I'm the only kid who gets that. Like, no, that's fucking weird, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, so basically, when this bloke played it to me, thinking he was going to shock me, played me a very legendary Throbbing Gristle performance from Brighton, this IRC Industrial Records cassette 05. Legendary performance. I remember talking to William Bennett from Whitehouse about it, and his dad was at that performance. He said an absolutely legendary Throbbing Gristle performance. So it's 77, July 77 or something. But unbelievable performance. One of the most inspiring performances I could ever have heard. But I was stunned. I listened to it and was like, this is fucking amazing. The guy selling it to me was clearly like thinking he was going to shock this silly little young teenager, and instead I discovered a whole world of music that was like, this is amazing. But I'd already visited these sounds because, my stepdad was a Lou Reed sort of obsessive.
Right.
And I remember him bringing home Metal Machine music. And I was in it. I couldn't believe it, but I was probably only 6, 7, 8 years old at the max when I kept pouring over the sleeve of Metal Machine music. That whole imagery was unbelievable. And I loved the legends on it of it being noise. I remember him playing it with a load of mates, and they're all sitting having bongs, and they're all like, what the actual fuck is this? You go, I remember really enjoying the tones of it. I couldn't have been 7 years old. I think it was released in 75, Metal Machine music, in it, I think. But I'd already had this road to noise music, and that was the other trajectory with my mom and my stepdad post this hippie band and the commune and etc. By the time they got their own flat, which is where I was raised from about the age of 5, when punk became a thing, because they were such Lou Reed fans, I think Lou Reed and Metal Machine music and so on led them to punk rock. So they had a really early punk rock band where my mom was taught to play bass in it. She couldn't play bass at all, so it's proper DIY, proper late 76, 77. And my stepdad, they called this band, because it's got a little bit of a legend. It's called Antisocial.
Right.
And they made, oddly, one of the rarest punk 7-inch singles ever. And it was in, you'll know this, I'm absolutely positive, John Peel, that box he had next to his door in the house, the 100 most prized 7-inch singles.
That he would run off with if his house burnt down. That's
it. In that box was that Antisocial, the only 7-inch single they made, which is fucking mental, really. And that was, they made that they had some manager who was like some small time Malcolm McLaren, like Birmingham's Malcolm McLaren, who thought that like let's court controversy, and they put an advert in NME offering £1 million to anyone up front who's willing to be beheaded live on stage.
No, well, blimey.
Yeah, I mean, the logic of that, I'm not entirely sure of. But besides it being, all right, yeah, £1 million, then I get killed. Okay. How much later? Week? Do I get 2 weeks for the £1 million? Do you know what I mean? But anyway, it's like that did actually go fucking mad, and the police turned up and whisked my mum and my stepdad off to the local police station, and come into my bedroom at like 5 a.m. as the police do, going, "It's all right, son, we're here to check the electric." As I'm thinking, I'm 7 years old and you're in my bedroom looking for an electric meter. Not that I understood what that was, but quite clearly. But yeah, anyway, police chaperoned to my nan's house, and they obviously it was like, oh, it was a publicity stunt. Oh, you're free to go. Do you know what I mean?
Blimey.
But as punk rock bands did in the 70s, as you and I and many others both know, caught in the extreme shock. It actually worked. They had a bit of press out of it. Then the story made like local newspapers, the NME, Sounds, Melody Maker, and they released that 7-inch. And I think they were popular for 3 weeks. Do you know what I mean?
Well, blimey. And did the manager, Les Hemmings, is that his name? Did he die?
Their manager at the time.
Yes, did he? Because the label manager is Rob Green, and then did they also have a band manager called Les Hemmings? Was he killed in a car crash?
Oh Jesus! I think that could have been his. I think that may be the other way around. If I remember, I think the manager of them was Bob Green. It was this guy, Bob Green,
right?
And I think he actually died in a car crash years later. But you've obviously got this in front of you. I think you might be.
I might be reading it in front of me. Yes, I know. I'm cheating here, aren't I? It's like being in an exam. And yeah. So did they play live much? By the way, Antisocial. Were they?
Yeah. In the 3 weeks where they capitalised upon that 7-inch single, and the shock beheading on stage thing. Invite.
Yes,
and they did actually get a couple of letters as well. They did, of course, get a few letters, saying, "Yeah, I'm up for it." Like,
and were they dabbling in the old Aleister Crowley world and sort of trying to sort of conjure up sort of dark spirits? And were they getting quite into some interesting cul-de-sacs?
I think they were a bit too council estate for that, to be honest. I don't think. I think my mom had a little dabble with witchcraft, but that's more down to my grandmother, who actually was a practicing white witch. She's German, and my mom was born in Bielefeld in Germany, 1947, and my nan was already a practicing white witch at that time.
Right.
So there was a witchcraft trajectory.
Because with the German, not all of it, that's a bit of a sweeping statement, but there was a lot of kind of during that turn of the century, wasn't there? There was a lot of kind of movement to sort of outdoors and sort of various earth magic, earth mystery.
Oh, yeah,
wasn't there?
absolutely.
So that probably was running in the family, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's so much occultism around, and that period as well, wasn't it? Even like, but the Nazi Germany, yeah. I mean, we had Himmler dabbling, didn't we, with the occult and all manner of business. But yeah, they hadn't gone. I think a lot of it was like it was too small time. It was too. It wasn't. It hadn't gone that far. They didn't have any academia behind them to actually be as inquiring as going as far as things like Crowley or even deeper, like Austin Osman Spare and so on, and all that really interesting. Which I became more fascinated. I had my little flirtation with that, I think, around the late 90s. I come around like this stuff. So for me, it was brought up in that environment with drug taking, alcoholism, crazy parties, and then books about witchcraft sitting next to Jehovah's Witness books. Meanwhile, Lou Reed's Metal Machine music as a soundtrack. And to be honest, what I got from all that eventually was punk rock. That was my thing. All this, when they formed this punk band and they brought home Rattlesnake Vickers by the Stranglers, and I think I was 8, that just changed me there and then. I became utterly obsessed with the Stranglers. 8 years old, I was like, this is the band for me. And they actually gave me their albums, you know, because it was the first band they took me to see the Stranglers on the Raven tour in 1979. You know,
right?
I think I was like 9.5 or something.
Yes.
So I was absolutely obsessed. I was obsessed with that bass sound immediately, which is basically that bass sound is what Godflesh is all about. You know, it was only all about JJ Burnell and the Stranglers. That's it. As soon as I heard that bass sound, it was like, I eventually will try to emulate and own that bass sound.
Yes.
And the style of playing as well. It's all Godflesh. It's all everything that I do, you know.
And did you take your mum's bass guitar at this stage and start playing with that?
Yeah, I was trying to play. I'd try and play, even when I was like 7, 8, I was trying to play both my stepdad, his Fender Strat. He had a Fender Stratocaster, which is what I ended up playing with Godflesh, and my mum's Fender Precision. I think they must have both been copies because there's no way on earth they would have afforded those because neither of them worked and both were on benefits, you know.
Yes.
And we lived in a shit old flat on top of the old co-op, you know, the old COE.
My God.
Yeah.
And the 80s, you know, I mean, we look at it and there's lots of exhibitions and books and everybody's romanticising, but it was actually really grim during what I can remember of a lot of the 80s. You know, we had Thatcher and then we had the Falkland War, the miners' crisis, we had Greenwood Common. God. I mean, it was all sort of getting, and there was a huge amount of unemployment and people just signing on. The youth from on the left of centre were just kind of giving up, really, weren't they, and just getting on the dole. So what was it? That must have been a council estate in Birmingham. There must have been a lot of high unemployment at this stage.
Yeah. It was one of those. I think that was the environment we were in. A place called Shard End. I actually met, you know, the bass player from Godflesh in Shard End, which is a horrible little suburb in outside central Birmingham. It's about 5 miles from the city centre. I think 5 or 6 miles. I met a lot of people I worked with. Dermot Dalton, who's also a bass player in my other band, Jesu, and I do other projects with, many projects with as well. A lot of people were met there, you know. But I was already making music and stuff, you know, like at a stupid age.
Yes.
But all from Chardin. Yeah, but I'm picking up those guitars, like trying to play bass. I remember desperately trying to play bass. My fingers were so small, and I wanted to play like JJ Burnell, so I'd pick up my stepdad's guitar, his Fender Strat instead, and try and play those sort of lines, you know. And then I remember saying to him one day after. I just bought one of the first Discharge 7 inches, I think, around that period. It's rated like 19. Well, it's 10 years old. I was 10 years old. And I said I wanted to learn a bar chord. I saw a picture of someone playing live. It was someone actually maybe quite funny next to my tastes, possibly. Someone like the Cockney Rejects. I think could have been like Mickey Gegas, the guitarist from the Cockney Rejects.
Right.
I think I was into the Cockney Rejects for like 3 weeks because they was a punk band. Do you know what I mean? That was the only premise of me being into them whatsoever. It's a punk band. I want to listen to any and every single punk band. But there's a picture of him grimacing, holding a bar chord. I was like, that's the punk chord. So I want to play that. I remember saying to my stepdad, who would just sit there soloing in silence for like an hour, playing David Gilmour solos. That was his thing, or Jimi Hendrix solos. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because he was a soloer. Now, I'd sit there and watch him soloing thinking, I don't get this. You know what I mean? I've got no interest in this whatsoever. I'm only interested in punk rock. And I said, can you please teach me that bar chord? So he taught me how to hold the bar chord. And he was like, do you want to know anything else after that? No. I was like, bar chord, that'll do. I know I can learn that. If I can hold it firm enough, I can actually write some sort of riff. And that was what I did. And I think I got into teaching just the basic chords, like the E, A, G, C, D. And I was like, okay, that's it.
Right.
I don't need to know anything else. I never learned anything else to the guitar whatsoever. Yet I've become somehow, rather accidentally, some sort of quote unquote legend of guitar. somehow. But to me, I'm not even a guitarist. I'm just like some kid who picked up, learned a bar chord, refused to learn anything else, and then just forged entirely my own path in terms of like, you know, coming up with chords purely because I like the sound, texture. I had no interest in what it was. I've spent my lifetime with that, with people saying, "Well, what's that chord you use? It's unbelievable. How did you reach that?" And it's just like, because I put my fingers there and I enjoy the sound. So that's it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I don't need anything more than that. Like, why didn't you learn, like, you know, the diatonic scale or the scale, the da 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 da? I'm like, I may play those scales, but it's purely because I feel it. I don't recognise written things like that. It's all, you know what I mean? To me, it's just emotional. I have no interest in a rule book of any description whatsoever. It doesn't even compute to me whatsoever. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing.
Oh, you want to learn this scale, or you want to? I'm like, no, I'm really happy in forging my own path, and I seem to think some people are like, wow, the guy can't even read music. I'm like actually quite proud of it, you know. It's because it's punk rock. It's DIY and it's punk rock, and that's me. You know, that's what I come from. That's what that's how I see myself. I still see myself as that kid.
Yes.
Forging his own path.
So 85, I mean, we haven't even got to the mid-80s. Had you kind of quit school before 16, or were you still sort of vaguely going to school?
No, I was out. I walked out of there. First GCSE exam, 15 years old. I'd already spent like, I mean, obviously it all makes sense now. I mean, I'm diagnosed autistic, you know, with CPTSD, part ADHD, and probably a whole load of other undiagnosed things, but I couldn't engage at school whatsoever. It was meaningless to me. Academia was just like, nah. And in music lessons, I was probably the biggest idiot. Nobody wanted to hear anything I had to say about music. Yeah, I'm sitting there. All I think of is music.
Right.
And no other interests besides music, you know. That was it. All I talked to kids about music. You could tell they just like, what the fucking hell is this kid going on about? And that was the only way I got on at school. I was actually rife for bullying. Probably an ideal candidate for bullying. Hypersensitive, couldn't really talk to people, shy around everyone, scared of everyone, would just cry and want to go home. Even when I reached, first year senior school, you know, terrified of everyone. But I was listening to punk rock, and that clearly, how I was so lucky is some of the tough kids were actually punk rockers.
Right.
So here was some kids who wanted to listen to what I had to say, you know. Very short-lived with these people because it was just the fashion punks, do you know what I mean? It was just like, here's like, you know, a tough guy music that some kids could get into, you know, because they obviously felt some sense of camaraderie with tough guys, you know, of which I despised, you know, on every level.
Yes.
But I was quite welcomed because I could also be a clown and had no filter. So suddenly I was welcomed into the tough guys gang because I was a punk, which is unbelievable. I should not have been there, and that was how I existed. But simultaneously, I could learn anything whatsoever. I'd only had the talent for art and somehow English, but I couldn't engage. My whole junior school experience was just staring out a window, looking at the few trees around the playground and just hearing music in my head and constantly being, Broadrick, 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 and me being like, going into tears because I've been shouted at.
Yes.
And not wanting to mix with all these kids and not really quite understanding it. Obviously, these days, you'd be diagnosed autistic in fucking a jot, and you'd probably be in the special school or in the special class, which is what I would have loved. And I maybe would have engaged in education if I would have had that avenue of possibility to actually not, because I'm so slow. Everything to me is so slow and so multi-layered and so nuanced and so overwhelming that it's all just a mess. You know, everything coming in, I can't filter it. I'm 360 all the time, totally sensory all the time. I'm absolutely mental sensory. Like everything to me is like sounds, smells, textures, tastes. Everything is so extreme that I'm just spending my whole time trying to filter these things down as much as possible. So obviously being brought up in a commune for 4 or 5 years wasn't really the greatest environment for someone with these conditions to be brought up in.
No.
So I'm hyper emotional, hypersensitive. So yeah, so music was the only fucking thing. And obviously, yeah, like we said, by the time I was at 15, I was already making. I was making an album a week when I was about 11 years old, you know, with my first cassette recorder. Most of that was me acoustically playing or whatever instrument. I was just so lucky to have these instruments in the house, you know, with my dad, my stepdad being a guitarist, my mom learning bass guitar. I was drumming from early age on like tins, the classic drummer shit. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Which was my first instrument really, because it was something I could bash. Clearly quite great when you're 5 years old. So that was where I began, was just like, was drums. I always thought I was going to be a drummer. And I was a drummer for a bit, like I was a drummer in HeadDirt. And the whole thing with Godflesh, you know, was, right, I'm not going to drum anymore, but I want to translate my drum parts into a machine. And that was the whole point, you know, because it was going back to guitar again, you know, so I could, you know, I had this circle as guitarist in Napalm Death, then left Napalm Death and was a drummer ahead of David, but I was writing guitar parts and writing bass parts. And then when Head of David kicked me out, all the demos I still had left from Head of David were what I brought to Godflesh. That was like my songs with Godflesh. Basically, that was the template, you know what I mean, of Godflesh. It was Head of David songs, essentially, that were rejected when they wanted to change direction. And I think they were sick of me being a maniacal, crazy, feral, or a noisy bastard, as Ruben Burrows would quite nicely put it.
So when did you join Napalm Death? Actually, that Napalm Death was one of the only times I met John Peel. Actually, it was a gig happening in Ipswich at the Caribbean Centre. It was Napalm Death, something like, you know, Extreme Noise Terror and Bolt
Noise
Thrower.
Terror, yeah.
And it was a classic, and he was there, and I was thinking, because I love John Peel, I used to record it with my trusty TDK D90
exactly
cassette.
The same as me. Exactly the same. Yeah.
And listen to it kind of religiously. Yes. And then scribble little things on the cassette going, good song, 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was, but who cares?
Absolutely.
Spent ages. My filing system was terrible. I'd be like, where the hell's that cassette?
Absolutely exactly the same. I think a lot of British people of our generation who are music obsessed were probably, most of us were there. Most of us were there with John Peel. That was my angle, you know, which I really hated about with, you know, with Napalm Death and Godflesh, was everybody assuming you come from some sort of metal background. You know, because metal to me was a byproduct. It was something I really enjoyed the iconography of, but didn't really connect with the music. It was punk rock for me, you know, and it was John Peel. Obviously, on Fridays, as you'll remember yourself quite clearly, once John Peel finished, it would go into Tommy Vance.
Tommy Vance, yes.
Rock show. And I would be, you know, the intro, dun 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 dun, you know, this solo and shit. And I'd be like, the fuck is this? I can't listen to this. Do you know what I mean? I'd be out of there like a fucking shot. And I knew kids, you know, obviously things being so tribal back then, as you remember in the 80s and stuff. I remember kids like me being the punk kid, and you had rock, you know, rockers, metal, but not rockers, the old school rockers like modern rockers, but like metal. I remember being really enamored with the imagery and stuff. I thought it was really attractive.
Sort of Black Sabbath, were they kind of a band that was very on your radar?
That came in senior school, yeah. My mom and my stepdad were anti-Black Sabbath, so they owned no Black Sabbath records because they always saw them as competition.
Right.
Because Black Sabbath, a band from Birmingham who made it, and they didn't, you know, one of them classic sort of council estate rivalry. So they didn't own a Black Sabbath record. And they also had a rivalry and shared a rehearsal room with, for a bit, was Judas Priest.
Right.
So they hated them as well. So I never really, you know, so again, I never got exposed to that form of metal. You know, the closest I got to heavy metal from my mum and Rob's collection, which was essentially my stepdad's collection, Rob, was oh, fucking hell. Lost myself.
Was it Motorhead or Hawkwind?
No, I wish it was. Motorhead, the thing for me was I loved Discharge. And I used to see kids in, you know, she's like 80, 81 or something, with punk, mental looking, crazy looking punk kids, really hardcore looking kids.
Yes.
With on the back of their jackets would be Motorhead and Discharge. And loads of studs in between. I remember thinking how hardcore that was. I remember thinking I got to hear this Motorhead. And some of my mum and stepdad's, one of their big dope dealers, one of their big weed dealers, whose house we were at a lot from when I was the age of 8.
Yes.
He was playing Motorhead there one day in a back room, and I remember walking into this back room. Everybody was arseholed and everybody was doing tons of drugs. I think it was I must have been 9 or 10. I'm trying to think when Overkill came out. Overkill was 79, I think. So I must have been about 9 or 10. And Overkill was playing the song.
Yes.
And I remember just being covered in goosebumps, like, holy fuck. It still to this day is one of the most beautiful pieces of music, that song. It's just like the introduction, the double kicks, the sound and texture of the double kicks and the impact and the production. Oh, my fucking Lord. It's one of the greatest pieces of music ever. And that basically, I saw this then, the correlation between Discharge and Motorhead, and this grey area that existed between punk and metal. And I just fucking adored it, and it was something that I embraced and then brought to and embellished with Napalm Death. Basically was this meeting ground, of punk and metal. That's
well, it's interesting.
But that's what I was saying. Sorry, I was just saying, I come from punk though. That's the thing, strictly punk rock.
But Lemmy sort of was in that kind of area in London, wasn't he, with the sort of Hawkwind gang, and then the sort of the punk gang. So he was very much kind of there with
absolutely. Absolutely, that's it. I love that period where he joined the Damned for I listened to some of those. I've got some of the the old tapes of when they do it's fucking amazing. I love the Damned anyway. I absolutely adore the Damned. Machine Gun Etiquette again is one of my favourite albums of all time. So that period again, 79, fucking the magic of records from 1979 just blows me away every time. I just think of the breadth and the diversity and just fucking hell, punk rock in them periods, and that fringe again between metal, like we were saying, like Motorhead and stuff. So that was the thing for me. Then music. It's like I was saying to you about being at school, and walking out of senior school in my first second GCSE exam. I think I did the first one. I remember looking around in the hall at everybody else, going, "Why is nobody questioning this? Why is nobody looking like I'm looking? Why is nobody looking around going, the fuck am I doing here?"
Yes.
So I finished that one, but then it took me the second one to actually put my pen down and look at the teacher and look at the kids and go, no one is looking. And I stood up, and I remember the teacher looking across at me like, what the fuck are you doing? Obviously, as we know back then, school could be pretty brutal, you could get hit.
Well, yes, I know the board rubber would come across the.
Or a fucking knuckle to the head. We had some teachers, give you a knuckle to the fucking head, man. Proper vicious bastards. I laugh about my son now. He's in tears. You can't believe the schools were fucking like that. Do you know what I mean? You lay a finger on a kid, you'd be fucking hung outside the school now. Do you know what I mean? And quite rightly fucking so as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I remember just standing up and walking out the fucking hall, and the teacher saying to me, "What are you doing? You can't just leave an exam." I'm like, "I'm not just leaving the exam. I'm leaving the school." And I just walked out the fucking school. I remember just flicking the V's at it as well. And I never came back again. Never went back, never did another exam. Got no GCSEs, I got nothing whatsoever. I think that weekend I organised a fucking free gig at the Mermaid in Birmingham, which Napalm Death played before I was in Napalm Death. And I was in about 3 projects that played that gig. That was the only interest of me, was playing that fucking gig. I couldn't give a shit about anything to do with school. Couldn't do it, couldn't engage in it, didn't learn it. I was too busy giving kids bootleg tapes of White House,
Yes, well, absolutely. And did you, at that stage, had your parents in their community, were they into the free festival scene and going to Stonehenge and, I don't know, dropping acid and sort of taking speed?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They were doing all the drugs and the booze, but it got more and more council estate, to be honest. Then it ended up on the door of religion. Everybody got fucked. They were all burned out, from too many fucking Mandis and bloody, all the drugs of the time.
Yes.
Booze was killing loads of them off. loads of acid casualties. You know, acid back then, obviously, when it was a bit of a unquantifiable. Who knows what people were taking? Do you know what I mean?
So when did they stop that scene, or did they continue on for quite a long time?
Well, that was the thing, that hippie thing, the commune thing. Then we moved to that part of Birmingham, Shard End. Then the punk rock thing, they formed Antisocial. That had a bit of notoriety. That fell in on its head. Nobody could really, they couldn't sustain it. They were going through a variety of different people in the band. I think my mum was out of it eventually. Eventually, what that turned into was just a pub rock band that were doing the British Legions around the shithole council estates in Birmingham, you know.
Yes.
And yeah, that was it. I remember getting dragged from pub to pub where they were doing like Sid Vicious's version of My Way in front of a load of pissed up fucking arseholes in some council estate ghetto, do you know what I mean? And they ended up also playing a notorious Hells Angels pub as well. And they had a bit of a thing there for like 50 quid on a weekly basis with all these Hells Angels. I got dragged out to all this shit like you wouldn't believe, do you know what I mean? I was in the middle of just ridiculous stuff. What I was exposed to was just crazy.
Yes.
But it got more and more crazy. There was a turning point that I remember seeing was somebody... there was some suicide with fucking one of their best friends, and then the drink and drugs thing, and they were doing speed all the time, doing council estate drugs, you know.
Yes.
The alcohol was taking over, a lot of violence to do with the alcohol.
And Special Brew?
What were they drinking? What were they drinking back then? I'll tell you what.
Special Brew was such a sort of, you know,
very 80s, that more 80s, isn't it? My mum and Rob were doing loads of speed and drinking barley wine. Remember that shit?
No, but a cider.
Barley wine.
I just remember there was a lot of cider and stuff.
Yeah. It's a bit, I am talking like 77, 78, going on to 79. What happened, basically, everybody did too many drugs.
Suicide. You mentioned suicide.
The lot of really bad shit went on around them. It was really bad scene anyway. Loads of violence. My mum is super violent with a number of, quite clearly, a number of personality disorders. It was a horror show. I think after a particular fucked up load of drugs, my mum got caught on the doorstep by the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
And that was pretty much it. Like they next thing I was, I'd gone from being in the middle of 10 years old in the middle of parties where you would see anything. It was just fucking lawless activities, to Bible studies within the space of about 2 years, and I was dragged to kingdom halls and council estate kingdom halls. So I'd gone from all that shit now into I'm being forced into religion. Meanwhile, like I was saying earlier, I just discovered industrial music. So I discovered Whitehouse, Throbbing Gristle, Mass Murderers, and I was getting more and more fascinated with the extremes of humankind. So it wasn't the best time for eventual 13-year-old to be also thrust into Bible studies whilst going through. Had quite an impact on me.
Well, quite. Yes, that's a hell of a pivot, as they say, isn't it? You can.
No, that was it. That was Jehovah's Witness thing. Killed them dead. They got rid of every friend one by one. Only started mixing with Jehovah's Witnesses. Going Bible fucking studies the lot. But eventually, I think my stepdad even basically almost stopped playing guitar, and all he was a fucking guitarist. He was a milkman besides it. When he actually finally got a job, he was a milkman. Right. He ended up doing social clubs. That's what happened to him. He literally made that 1 7-inch that was like sort of ended up famous with John Peel or whatever, and he eventually ended up just. I remember, when I was about 13, being taken round with my mum when I was, getting into all this crazy music and Jehovah's Witnesses, and he was playing the local British Legions and playing the Birdie song, And you see the look on his face, the scowl on his face as he was sitting there with some in front of old deers at a bingo. Do you know what I mean? Doing the fucking Birdie song. Yeah, and I remember thinking, wow.
Yes, it's. If only you had a camera to capture some of those moments.
Oh,
It,
Jesus Christ! My childhood is. I think I've been expressing the confusion, horror, and madness through my music. I think ever since, I was really making all this music. Do you know what I mean? Like I was saying, I'd be anything I could do. As soon as I could even basically make a chord, and I had my first like mono cassette recorder. I was recording it,
yes.
and I was fascinated with the durations. Times of songs was my first obsession. So when I got my first digital watch, I was one of the first kids to get the council estate digital watch. It had a fucking timer on it. So I'd make up all these songs in my head and time them all. And
oh yes, because we yes, I remember saying, "Oh my god, that was 2 seconds. Oh my god, that's a second." Yes,
yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Only people of a certain age can remember that moment.
Oh, it was beautiful. I was telling my son recently, I like my Apple Watch. I really like it because it's reminiscent of that first watch I had when I was about 10.
Was it a Timex or Casio?
I think it was probably one of the first Casios. It must have been. I mean, this is council estate living, so how they got it for me and afforded it, I don't know.
No.
But it was wonderful. At the time, it had one of them old primitive batteries in it, and you could time things. So it had a timer, which I was obsessed with. And like I was saying, I remember listening to John Peel in the bed at 10 years old with wireless next to my head, like you were saying, the same trip, and timing songs as well. I'd be fascinated with. Then I'd make up songs in my head and make whole albums and time every single song, and then write down each timing, and then come up with I was fascinated with the 45-minute album length, and how many songs I could get in. That's quite weird, really. They ended up in Napalm Death, and we ended up doing an album, or one side of an album, the Scum album, where we had fucking 27 songs. Do you know what I mean? And we did the 1 second song.
Excellent. Yes.
Suffer, which is somewhat famous. And what gets me about that track, is people cover it and they just play one chord and they go, "You're all right on one chord," but it isn't. When we wrote that song and we said, "Let's do a 1 second song," and I wrote the riff, it's got 3 chords.
Right.
And nobody believes that. Everybody was just like, fuck off. And if anybody would have videoed us back then, which they didn't, which is a real shame, they would see, because some nights we'd play it 20 times, do you know what I mean? It was da-da-da, it's da-da-da, 3, it's fucking 3 power chords. It's a 3 power chord riff. Everybody thinks it's 1 chord. And it's somewhat of an insult because, it's like, the whole point is that you get 3 chords in that second. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's why it's the fastest song, and the Mick Harris blast beat with it is, you know what I mean? There's still enough beats in there. It's so.
And where did you record your that first side of the album?
Oh, that was the rather not very nicely named Rich Bitch Studios in Birmingham, which was I think Black Sabbath used it as their rehearsal rooms for a bit.
Right.
I actually pissed next to Tony Iommi in there once, But unbelievably, in the rare time, I thought there's no one in the toilet. Amazing. And you go for a piss. I'm not going to use a cubicle because I'm an only cubicle guy. Do you know what I mean? So I went to the pissoir. Who comes walking in and pisses right next to me? Fucking Tony Iommi. And he actually turns to me and goes, "All right, mate." And I was like, "All right, Tony." And I walked out, stopped pissing, of course, frozen. Walked out. I was like, "Oh my God."
That was it.
But they rehearsed a lot. That was fucking during the Godflesh rehearsal, I think, in about 1989 or something like that, when we were still in Birmingham, or 1990 or something like that. But whatever, anyway. But yeah, the Sabbath used that quite a bit, Rich Bitch Studios. It's somewhat legendary to Birmingham. And we did, we did.
And did you play live with Napalm Death, by the way?
Oh, Jesus, yeah. We played live all the way up until we recorded the A-side of Scum, which was just a demo at the time, or intended as a demo.
Yeah.
And even once it was recorded, continued to play. Some of that is really hazy with me now. Nick Bullen, who was in Napalm Death with me at that time, who actually invited me into Napalm Death in 1985 on the strength of a punk demo I made with my band Final. Which wasn't a fucking punk band. It started off as an industrial music band when I was 13, with another good friend, Andy Swan, who I met in Birmingham. Everyone would meet at record shops then, or the rag market in Birmingham, which is where I met Nick Bollen. It's a shitty, third-hand clothes market, which had, record bootleg stalls in it and stuff like that, selling bootleg types of post-punk things. That's where I heard like Throbbing Gristle and stuff, and that story I was talking about. I met Nick Bollen there and Andy Swan, who had a synthesizer, I think, and I was like, I've got a shortwave radio, and I've just heard Throbbing Gristle 2 weeks ago. Let's make a band, which eventually became Final,
Yes.
And Final became it's now my longest standing project. It's like it was like 83 or something, I think, the first session I had. Even Nick Bollen joined it for a bit as well, because I met Nick Bollen, and he then told me about Napalm Death and that they had a song on a Crass compilation, and I was a massive Crass fan, so I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? Imagine the dream about having a record on Crass Records. Do you know what I mean? And he heard, basically, Final went through all these changes, and I had another couple of guys in. I had this punk phase, which I wanted to nurture my Killing Joke, Crass, Amoebics, Discharge, post-punk sort of obsessions, For a minute, I changed Final from an industrial band into this weird post-punk thing. It even had a bit of early Sisters of Mercy in it, talking to drum machines, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it had a bit of that in it as well, a bit of early Sisters, the Reptile House, one of my favourite records of all time, Drum Machine, fucking, there you go. So I introduced a bit of that, and I did this demo at Rich Bitch again, pre fucking Napalm Death. I gave it to Nick Bollen, and that got me into Napalm Death. They basically pretty much sacked every other member, and I joined, and they played my songs, and that was it. That was in Napalm Death,
And what's the rehearsal like with Napalm Death? How did you bring your sort of songs together? How did they get sort of demoed and stuff, or the ideas formulated and then put down on tape?
I mean, we were ridiculously young. I mean, I was always the youngest kid as well. So, like, I think when I joined Napalm Death, if it was 85, I was like 15.
Yes.
So I brought these songs in. Nick Bollen asked me to join with the drummer, Miles Ratledge, or punk name Rat, asked me to join the band. And they got rid of the other guys in the band, and they basically wanted to do my songs that were on this Final demo, So, but also I was really influenced as well. Then Nick and Rat exposed me to American hardcore and early hardcore punk and other things that I hadn't heard in that regard. So really, we didn't really have to rehearse at rooms either. It was amazing where they lived. It was like a really leafy, very nice place between Coventry and Birmingham called Meriden. Sorry, there's a place near where I live now called Meriden. Beautiful, leafy, nice place. They had separated houses there. And Nick had like a sort of disused garage, and we'd rehearse in there.
Right.
And I would just teach everyone my songs, basically. We'd play my songs, and they would evolve from there, This is pre-Mick Harris. This is before we became like the fastest band in the world. You know what I mean? This was with Rat. And it was, as far as I was concerned, it was Nick and Rat's band, and they joined. I had I already loved what they did, but they wanted to play my songs, But, I'd be nowhere without them asking me into that band. I'm sure I would have found something. People have always said to me, now you would have found something anywhere, because that's what you do. That's your obsession. You would not have let it go. You would have kept making music until somebody was listening. Do you know what I mean? So, but I do feel privileged that they invited me into Napalm Death, wanted to make my music, and that gave me a platform for an entire career in music,
Well, yeah, absolutely. And obviously having John Peel become such a huge fan as...
and I'd left the band by that time.
And you'd left. Was that a big decision to leave?
Sorry?
What was the decision to leave the band? What was that? How did that come about?
I mean, here's the thing. Whenever we talk about Napalm Death with people, I think people, often don't see age. They don't see that this is a bunch of kids that were, me 15 years old, 16, Nick Bollen, and then Mick Harris, 2 years older than me. But I mean, this is fucking mental teenagers, crazy teenagers going through crazy hormonal things, meanwhile being music obsessed, an array of mental health problems, and so on. So I mean, fucking hell. And this is kids of this age doing drugs, doing magic mushrooms, drinking everything they
yes,
can.
magic mushrooms. Love them.
Yeah, it's that period, you know what I mean? It's the magies, yeah. So excuse me, I'm so quick thing.
Yes.
So yeah, it's that thing. I mean, so basically it's a bunch of teenage boys all thrown together, making fucking crazy music, doing drugs, doing drink. It's only going to end in tears.
Yes, this is going to happen. Well, at least you got one album, which is
very volatile. Very volatile personalities, you know what I mean? Tons and tons of interpersonal problems. Usual band stuff times 10 in a way, because instead of it being a bunch of 23-year-olds, it's a bunch of fucking 15 to 17-year-olds. So pretty mental. And it was really accelerated as well, Felt like Napalm Death. I mean, it was like, I don't know. I brought that music in. We did a demo like that, which was the Hatred Surge demo. Then me and Nick became more enamored with wanting to play faster. We met Mick Harris. He was in a punk band and an old psychobilly band that were influenced by like the Meteors and those sort of bands. Noticed that he played fast. We were quite interested in the fast thing. We unfortunately sacked Rat out of his own band and swapped for Mick Harris. We brought the songs to Mick Harris. I said to Mick Harris, here's my songs, let's speed them up. We literally went to his parents' house. This is all fucking space of weeks or a very, very short amount of time. Went to his parents' house. We were already listening to other bands that were getting faster and faster, like Siege from Boston and American hardcore bands. And we sat in his bedroom, and every Napalm Death song that I already played, we just sped them up. And we sped them up and up and up. And Nick wasn't even there. It was just me and Mick Harris. And I just kept saying faster. And he was just getting faster and faster. And the man was just playing in the end. It was just hyperspeed. And it was something to behold. It was absolutely something to behold. Mick then, he called himself the Tornado, do you know what I mean? And it fucking was. It was incredible. The blast beat, that's what it was. That's what we called it. That's what he called it. I didn't come up with that name, but we both sat there and got him going faster and faster and faster. And then we presented it to Nick, and as far as I can remember, Nick was just like, yeah, that's what we're doing, All the songs are now fucking hyperspeed, and we eventually were performing like that. We were already performing prior to that. We were like the resident band at this legendary venue called the Mermaid in Birmingham, which has become quite a well-documented punk rock venue, DIY venue. I mean, like I was saying to you, when I walked out of school, the first thing I did was put on a free show there, because a 15-year-old could put on a show there. Do you know what I mean? You could literally just go, I'll put on a show to one of the landlords there, who was the Sikh guys, who were just wonderful. I'll just go, yeah, that's great. You know what I mean? we'll take the money from the bar. You get a few bodies in, it'll be fine. Yes. And I just print up loads of leaflets and do a free gig, And I don't even know how I fucking got the PA in there. It's still beyond me. I think you could rent a PA for 20 quid. Probably did it with pocket money, or I sold a couple of records. Do you know what I mean?
Amazing.
And bands would just play for free. I just play in front of other mates, shit like that, really. So yeah, we were playing the entire. So we became the house band, probably because we were kids. So we were easy to scam. Because we'd play for a pint of scrumpy between us and one cigarette. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
So promoters, rather, I can't even think of the word. Unscrupulous promoters could take advantage of you. Which you have a lifetime of in this wonderful music industry. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Especially when you're really gullible like I am, which I really am. Unfortunately, I do anything with the music. Do you know what I mean? So I've walked myself into all manner of shite in this industry, populated by. So yeah, you give it very easy to take advantage of. Like I say, I think all of us then were chuffed with a pint of scrumpy and a shared cigarette. So we became the resident house band because we're pulling all our mates. We're also the resident comedy band for a bit. But we were clearly getting better. But it was one thing, I've said this before, it's been quite well documented, but by the time we got Mick in the band and we were this three-piece and we sped up these tracks, people stopped laughing. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, people were coming to see us.
Right.
And it was quite interesting. We'd be supporting a variety of punk rock bands and we were drawing a lot of people, but we weren't really going outside of Birmingham, it was obvious that we were now doing something. People were paying very much a lot of attention to it, you know. And that's like the irony, like I was saying. Here's the real funny, bizarre story about the whole John Peel thing. So obviously being, like you, a huge John Peel kid, I was in my bed, like I was saying, with a little wireless radio glued to the side of my head, staying up late, not giving a fuck, having no fucking sleep for school. 10 years old, John Peel, my guru, do you know what I mean? Like many of us, everything was coming from Peel.
Yes, absolutely.
Mental. So I leave Napalm Death in 86. I joined Head of David, who had already had their first John Peel session. Two, actually. They saw me drumming for a pre-Godflesh. It had me, Ben Green from Godflesh, and Paul Neville, who ended up playing on Half a Street Cleaner, well, not the CD, but a third of it, and Slave State record. He did some stuff with second guitar with Godflesh. It was a it wasn't pre-Godflesh, really, but some of the songs did take songs to Godflesh, a couple of them, called Fall of Because. I'd still play with 2 or 3 bands a night, do you know what I mean? I played with Napalm Death and played with Fall of Because on drums. Head of David saw me drumming and basically asked me to join Head of David on the strength of seeing me play with Fall of Because. And I knew it was probably time to leave Napalm Death. I'd already was just getting tired of the whole thing, but I think it was really, really quite quick. You know, I could have, like, you know, the songs for Scum. I still say this now. I could have written 20 of those records. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That music was just like, I just keep going and going. I could write, you know, an album of that stuff in a week. And it was almost going too slow in a way, but then went really fast. We did the demo. And I ended up just fucking being a 16-and-a-half-year-old kid and fucking trying to give it to any label that would take it from me. Do you know what I mean?
Were Earache going at that stage?
Were they what, sorry?
Were Earache records in sort of, were they up and running at that stage, Earache records?
Yeah, they'd released, I think we'd already tried to shop the demo to them. I remember going to, I think, a flat in Nottingham when we were performing. We were playing with like bands like Concrete Socks, and I think it was a flat, and I think we were playing the demo for the first bit of Scum to John Socks, who was the original drummer for Concrete Socks and vocalist, who became the vocalist for Heresy, and Digby Pearson himself, the head cheese behind Earache Records. And they weren't interested. I remember they weren't interested. I remember being in their flat and feeling quite uncomfortable, as I often did around most people, but playing them the demo, and I remember there was no interest. It was like, oh, okay. Which is ironic that they were the people who ended up taking the demo from me, you know what I mean? And then I left the band, you know what I mean? And here's the ironic thing, as I say, I joined Head of David. I did a Head of David John Peel session within a couple of months of joining Head of David. Napalm Death, I had lost contact with Nick Bullen had already left as soon as I did.
Yes.
Mick Harris, I then found out that Mick Harris had got a whole new band together and had hooked up with Digby Pearson with Earache, and we're doing like a side 2 of the Scum album. So I heard that and was like, wow, okay, interesting. So that was all going on. I joined Head of David. We did some tours with Head of David, like Europe and stuff. I did my first John Peel session with Head of David. I think I was now 17, which was unbelievable. I couldn't believe I was doing it. This is the weirdest shit ever. The opening night, I sit down to John Peel to hear my first ever session on John Peel with Head of David. Sat there, got it all ready. Was there with, I remember being there with the people I was talking about, Ben Green, Dermot Dalton, Paul Neville. We're all getting stoned. We're going to listen to fucking my first session with Head of David. We're all going to listen to it together. Council Estate, Birmingham, Dermot's parents' house. Here we go, John Peel. We all love John Peel. I'm actually on fucking John Peel. Unbelievable. Let's check this out. John Peel plays the first Head of David song that I'm on. Straight after it, he plays a song from Scum, Napalm Death. First time he ever played it. I literally sat there and my jaw did not get off the fucking ground. I was like, my fucking God, I've just had my first time I've ever been played on John Peel, who I worship, with Head of David, my first John Peel session, and they follow it with Napalm Death. And it was one of my songs from that side of Scum, you know. And I was just in disbelief. So I had no idea that John Peel was going to play Napalm Death, or that he'd even heard Napalm Death. Do you know what I mean? Within about a fucking month of that, they were playing Napalm Death on daytime radio. Do you know what I mean? Richard fucking Skinner or something playing Napalm Death. It became, you must remember that, it became this fucking thing.
It was a thing.
Front of Enemy and all this shit. Yeah, and it just like, I just watched it go mental. Meanwhile, I was in Ella David, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, fucking, that's unbelievable. You know what I mean? Wow. But I had no contact with anyone with Napalm Death or Earache Records or anything during that period, you know.
No, absolutely. And
not until I formed Godflesh. Only when I formed Godflesh. I mean, I think from what I remember, Mick Harris heard Godflesh, the first mini album, and then took it to Earache Records. So the irony was bizarre, do you know what I mean? Then Earache Records wanted to sign Godflesh, do you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, you never signed Napalm Death. You never signed me anyway, do you know what I mean, for Scum, that's for sure.
Blimey. And were you getting, because, you know, with John Peel, you know, he'd played all that indie stuff. He played the Bundy Boys, reggae, dub reggae, you know, sort of happy house, hardcore, Detroit. Did you enjoy sort of listening to his eclectic kind of range of music? Because that was something that I always got drawn to.
100%. Absolutely. This is what I didn't understand at school, like, you know, because I was like a punk rocker and all the rest of it. So I enjoyed the tribalism of it. And I've always enjoyed singular scenes, but I would say I'm into a million singular scenes. So I adored that. And my stepdad's record collection mirrored, not Peel himself, but was eclectic, you know. He had key records, clearly, you know, but he had Hendrix, Pink Floyd, but then he had punk records, you know, like the first Clash album, the Nevermind the Bollocks, Ratus Non Vicus, No More Heroes, you know, the Stranglers. Then he had Can albums. So I had that into fucking krautrock. That was my lead in, you know. I was listening to Can when I was like 9 years old, you know what I mean? And he had records. That was how I heard Brian Eno. He was obsessed with Roxy music, particularly early Roxy music.
Yes.
And my mum's first husband, actually, who was the drummer in that band, again, I wrote fondly. I remember him bringing round the first Brian Eno album, because they were all obsessed with Roxy music and Brian Eno, and when Here Come the Warm Jets. And when he first released Ambient One, yes. I remember, fuck knows what age I was. I mean, Ambient One is, I think, is it 78 or something ridiculous? So clearly I was about 8 or 9, so I'd already had this thing for Metal Machine music by Lou Reed, like I was saying, at 7 or 8 years old. And I then heard Ambient One. I must have been, again, 8 or 9. I think Ambient One is. I was only listening to it last week. I have an annual listen every time I upgrade my hi-fi. Actually, I have an annual listen to music for airports.
That's the one.
Ambient
Yes.
One. Yeah. I remember hearing that, and my stepdad Rob, and the initial drummer in their band John Harrison, who brought it round to their house, both just sitting at each other, looking at each other like motionless, listening to it. And I don't know if they were into it or not, but I remember feeling this emotional surge from it.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time I realised how I was really brutally emotionally affected by things, particularly music, like having not only music having an empowering effect on me as a young kid, but also having a highly melancholy effect on me. I knew I had terrible bleak nightmares from the age of 4 or 5, and seeing things in the walls talking to me, and all manner of fucking shit, voices all the time and all manner of shit. But definitely a real horrible sense of melancholy and loneliness and blackness to everything, and nightmares about my mom, and a lot of this always had this horrible, deep, emotional emptiness to it, which I now know is childhood depression, you know, but I didn't know I was experiencing that. So when I heard these really emotional musics, you know, I'd be wanting to cry and shit. Mm-hmm. So I really identified with you know, music for airports now I find really, really got in. But for some reason, I've become quite cold to it now, and I more just listen to it as sound and texture now. I think the emotional impact has, I think I probably drained the very life out of that record for its emotional impact. You know what I mean?
Did they get David Bowie's Low album? Because that was also one of those ones. I remember my brother getting it.
God, yeah. As a kid, fucking hell. That was another obsession of Rob, I should have mentioned, was David Bowie. Yeah. And that was, again, because I think they were fascinated with, you know, they were, even though they were like council estate people, they could intellectualize music. Yeah. I think even if they couldn't talk it academically, it was like they could feel it emotionally, and that was something that I immediately could recognize. I remember when they bought Lodger as well, not just Low, yes, but Lodger. And I remember, like, you know, the song Heroes is when I was 8 years old, having a massive impact on me. And Low, I was fascinated with this. Oh, my God. I remember many times they were, again, 9 or 10, probably 9, really. 8, 9, I think was where this music really fucking hit me so hard. Being at, again, someone else's house and them doing drugs all night, and and me being in some other kid's bedroom, and then them taking me downstairs as the sun was coming up. And I was sitting in a room as the sun was coming up, and me watching the sun coming up, and side 2 of Low. I must have been 9 years old or something, and War's Hour, and them all doing all sitting around doing bongs. Clearly, I was getting high from all this shit as well. Do you know what I mean? I was obviously like residual fucking dope smoking, you know, an 8-year-old amongst all that, and listening to like War's Hour and just looking out this window as the sun rises. I'll never fucking forget that shit. And that album now, it's another annual one for me. I revisit it and I have to be emotionally equipped. You know what I mean? Like ready for fucking hell, man. This is going to take me to some places, you know, that it did as a kid. You know, I was just
well, it's I know it's interesting how music. It's interesting you mentioned melancholia, because I sort of, from a young age, I do remember, bizarrely, a band that we haven't mentioned but had a big impact when I was about 10 was the lyrics of the Carpenters songs, because they had this kind of sense of.
I was late to the Carpenters, but yeah, I was late to the Carpenters, but man, yeah, it took it. Ben Green from Godflesh, he introduced me to the Carpenters, but I knew some of the songs as a kid, and again. I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry, but I was going to say, but I'm feeling your same pain. There was definitely, when I remember being older and going, oh my God, to a couple of songs, I think when Ben Green played it, it was like, I remember this as a kid and having such an emotional impact on me, like fucking really upsetting me. I remember the summer that I was obsessed with this song. I still am to this day, as a fucking melancholy anthem, and it's a beautiful song. And it's ultra cringe and cheese probably to most people. Was Everybody's Got to Learn Sometimes by the Corgis.
Oh yes, love that song.
You love it. Oh yes. My God. Oh God, and my God, as a young, when that was released, I would fucking weep and weep and weep. And but I'd hide it from everyone. Do you know what I mean? I'd just be like, I can't tell. No one knows. No one can know I emotion. You know, I'm in tears like this with these fucking songs. You know what I mean? I couldn't articulate it, being that young, why music would have such a fucking extreme impact on me. But it's definitely that impact, that emotional impact that music had on me. This really hallucinatory, almost seasonal-based impact as well, because sunlight has got so much to do with that for me, because lights is so fucking dramatic to me. Light, like it's so important. It's so fucking, like, you know, lighting in rooms can fucking kill me, or I have to walk out of rooms if the light's not right. And how I endured it for years, do you know what I mean? But all lights have to be just fucking right. Sunlight as well can be so depressive to me, yet so enlightening as well. But there's a certain time in the year when the sun sets that is so fucking heartbreaking to me, where I can never stop playing heartbreaking music around that sort of period, but I will just weep and weep and weep, and the song will just stay and stay and stay. But that fucking song is one of them. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes.
Ironically, well, not ironically at all, coincidentally, many years later, a really great artist called The Field did a version of Everybody's Got to Learn Sometimes, and his art was cutting up these songs into like micro cut-ups and realigning them and juxtaposing them really oddly, and making like new fucking beautiful things out of them. Sorry, I'm really inarticulate tonight. I can't seem to get a sensible word out. But
no, no, you're not at all. You're right on it. But yes, the field. Everybody's got to learn sometime. So yes,
yeah,
he's reimagined it all. Just
yeah,
really
exactly through taking sample cut ups, and it was really it's not like it was just really fascinating when he did that, because I got into the field again as a really melancholy thing. It's like melancholy deep house music, do you know what I mean? Really beautiful music. And he arrived at that on a later album. I was already quite obsessed with his work, but I remember thinking, shit, you got the nail on the head there, do you know what I mean? It was like, talk about a beautiful cringe song that I could mention that song to anyone as a kid. I think one of the only first people I ever mentioned it to was Ben Green from Godflesh, because he would have a thing for a lot of melancholy songs, which I'd have a massive thing for. Melancholy pop songs particularly. I wouldn't find much, and then obviously I discovered loads of melancholy indie music as well, which was fantastic.
But you were probably, because you're a bit younger than me, but I do remember the 70s. There was a Harry Nilsson song, I Can't Live If Living Is Without You. And also there was Terry Jacks with Seasons in the Sun. And actually, I was probably, 8 or 10, but I just found both of those, the lyrics just being absolutely like with Karen Carpenter and singing, talking to myself and feeling down and, nothing seems to fear. I just, want to quit, which kind of references a kind of suicidal feeling. I think those songs do have a bizarre kind of sadness to them, which is like, but then, you read a bit more about them later on and you think, oh my God, they are depressing. They are really depressing songs.
Exactly. Yeah. Once you research these stories, sometimes as well, I don't want to know. You know what I mean? With some songs where they just have such an emotional impact on you that I like the magic of that. I find myself doing it a lot now, though. I will listen to things and go deep into like, fucking hell, I was listening to this record since I was a kid and I know nothing about it. And that's almost the magic of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like this mystical fucking just magical album that just fucking comes out of nowhere, and it paints these pictures that you interpret and that you translate, and then you wear them. It's and they become a part of your tapestry of life and a soundtrack to your existence and dreams and nightmares.
Did you ever listen to any John Lennon, his early stuff like Mother and tracks like that? Did they ever come into your consciousness, or did you not sort of resonate with them?
Some pieces. I was really very late to some of that stuff. I was quite late to the Beatles in some regard.
But when he was doing his kind of primal scream stuff, where he was like dealing with all his upset and his childhood stuff, I just wondered.
You know what? I only this is unbelievable. Only about 2 months ago did I suddenly see the beauty in the song Mind Games.
Right.
I had always just heard it in the background and thought, I love that motif, the main motif, but I'm not into it. And it's all just made sense to me about 4 weeks ago, literally. So it's really funny that you bring up John Lennon. And now I've got that album like sitting there going, right, okay, it's going to be a big one, but I've got to reserve a night for this. Do you know what I mean? I've got to go there. But I'm suddenly playing that song over and over again, and I'm just suddenly getting obsessed with it. But fucking talk about it years later, do you know what I mean? It took me ages with some of that stuff. And stuff that really had a melancholy effect on me was as a kid that, like the things I was saying about I'd weep to, but as a young kid, but one of the worst was The Wall, Pink Floyd.
Oh, yes.
I remember Rob. Yeah, oh, Jesus Christ. When Rob brought that home and he would just play that, I would have to just go up to my room and fucking weep and weep and weep. Do you know what I mean? It was just like fucking hell. That's so fucking mind-numbing. And that is, some of that record is the almost the conceptually or somewhat just aesthetically the basis of my other band, Jesu.
Oh, yes.
Which is a vehicle for melancholy music, That's entirely the basis of that band. It's very singular. Ultimately, it's even more singular than Godflesh, I find, because it's the same record over and over again, and that's the point. It's not meant to be, it's almost comical if people go, oh, it's a new Jesu album 20 years later, it's the same fucking boring, long, depressing bollocks. And it's like, well, precisely. That is what it is. That's the vehicle for it. It's like, there's no pretensions there. Besides, you know what I mean? It's like, I intend to make the same album over and over again with a different feel to it. That's what it is. It's a meditation on a singular theme that I wish to express until I fucking don't cease anymore. Do you know what I mean? That is the project where I know if I can reach any ripe age, I will still be writing that music in the end bed. Do you know what I mean? If I'm lucky to get that far,
Yeah.
or even make it to the end
And during that period of the late, well, not the let's say, that did you start listening to bands like the Swans and people?
Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. Oh, fucking Swans was early Swans was a massive turning point for me. I mean, clearly you listen to early Godflesh and it's there's so much Swans in it, it's ridiculous. And there's so much fucking more as well. Of course, it wasn't intended as some carbon copy. There's a lot of everything that I listened to in early Swans, because as early Swans, early Godflesh, because obviously Swans didn't use mechanized drum machines, and they also didn't use chuggy metal riffs or listen to Black Sabbath. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Or Celtic Frost, or or Discharge, or because all that's in Godflesh as well. But yeah, Swans for me was pivotal in terms of because obviously I was obsessed with Joy Division and New Order.
Yeah.
And when I heard Swans, when my good friend who I mentioned earlier, Andy Swan, who was in final with me, he came across Cop and he gave it to me on a tape, and he said something to me like, "You're going to love this, because it's almost like Joy Division playing the birthday party, but like on the wrong speed or something." And that whole write up alone to me was enough for me to go, there's no way I couldn't love this. And then when I heard it, it was just like life changing. But it wasn't Cop. It was, I then immediately bought the Young God EP, a 4-track EP, which opens with a song called I Crawled.
Yeah.
The other songs like Raping a Slave, Young God, This Is Mine. It's still one of my favourite records to this day. Where can I fucking begin with that record? But I played it recently. I had a hi-fi upgrade again, and I played it recently for about the first time in 2 years. Fuck. It's probably one of the most emotional records ever made, for me. Even to talk about it, I want to cry. Do you know what I mean? Brutal.
Yes. It's just, they've always just been one of those, but I just love that texture they created during that time, especially with Jarbo. I think that was the...
Oh, and that period was, oh my God, yeah. I had the pleasure of producing an album for Jarbo, and also working with the drummer from that period with Swans like Children of God, Holy Money, Public Castration is a Good Idea. Greed was Ted Parsons,
right?
A New York City, Boston-born, amazing person and amazing drummer, and a lifelong friend of mine since he joined Godflesh in 1996 for a bit. So I had the pleasure of working with him for many years, and Swans at that period for me was untouchable. It was just utterly untouchable. So I've had my dalliances with members of the band as well, and and worked, and had a privilege to have worked with. Unbelievable, unbelievable. So that was a massive turning point for me, and a huge turning point for me. That influenced even, like Napalm Death, because I brought that Swans influence of those records from 84, 83, Filth, the Young God EP and Cop into Napalm Death as well, and even the Hatred Surge demo and stuff like that, and even Final, Final, when it changed for that moment into like a post-punk band, like I was saying, I had two other guys, Dan Johnson, Phil Timms, and got them playing my songs. Swans became a thing then, even in Final for a bit, where I was influenced by that, the reductionism, the minimalism, and the sheer brutality of texture. Really, the brutality of texture, I think, is what, like you said yourself, it's the textures, and again, it's the it's the filth and the filth of texture. And how hallucinatory those textures are, and how fucking nightmarish, but how close to fucking dirt and sheer emotion they are, both joy and hatred and everything in between, pain, pure emotional pain, pure emotional music.
But
so, yeah,
I mean, I know it's a bit unfashionable, but I do like some of the lyrical work on that album they did with MCA, yes, with I think it was Burning World. They did.
Oh God, the one that Bill Laswell produced and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd well left by that time, but I definitely appreciate what they were doing. Do you know what I mean?
And yes, and there was a track they did called Blind, which I thought was just a lyric.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful, really beautiful. Loads of that album is really down to Bill Laswell's productions, isn't it? It's even some stuff you find on some solo Bill Laswell albums. He had such a big part in that record. But
yes.
I'd left Swans by that time. I don't think I ever really returned, unfortunately.
No.
No matter how much I still think it is one of the greatest bands of all time. Do you know what I mean? I mean, definitely had an impact on me as severe as the Stranglers did. You know, like I was saying, and as severe as like say, I mean, for me, as important as any of this stuff.
We're here.
Did I miss the hip hop? Me saying how important the first Public Enemy album was, and the first Eric B. and Rakim album, and the first Beastie Boys album. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, so interesting, because I, through the John Peel thing, got obsessed with early hip hop. So I got Yo Bum Rush the Show, LL Cool J, the early single Rock the Bells.
Absolutely.
And there was a load of other people he did with Marley Mark and Roxy Shante, and I suppose there was Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5. But there was also Sleeping Bag Records did Tila Rock, which was a really good one. The Skinny Boys did Rip the Cut, which was just fantastic. It was very brutal.
Remember them all. Honestly, I was just saying about the Street Sounds compilations.
Oh, God. Morgan Khan with the Street. Oh, my God, they were brilliant. I used to sort of get them.
Yes, absolutely. You could get them. Birmingham Library had some of these records. I remember I loved that. Like you just said, all the wicked reference points. Absolutely. I fucking love that shit. And I love this cassette culture, like beatboxing and boombox. And I even remember trying to do my own cut-ups on a twin cassette deck, which about the week before I was recording Power Electronics on, do you know what I mean? So it was just like, I remember literally listening to stuff like Ramley and Whitehouse and then discovering fucking hip-hop, and then thinking like, Jesus Christ, and then seeing another correlation between these as well. So massive for me.
Because they organised something, I think it was UK Fresh 85 or 86, where they had 2 days of all these kind of bands. And I went down there, completely blew my ears, because everyone had whistles at those gigs. It was just the whistles, but that beat as well. But I mean, there was African Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash. There was Mantronics, who were
Mantronics were killer then. At that time, they were absolutely amazing. Yes. Yeah, I remember Paul Neville, who was in Godflesh, was informed because with him buying Mantronics albums, and we just sit there getting stoned, going like, whoa, this is all a drum machine, man. We just wanted to listen to drum machines. I remember that as well. I was just like, I want to listen to drum machines. It's so classic. Godflesh ended up becoming, a machine. Even, am I cutting off, or is it still there?
You just slightly. You went a bit sort of.
It's like with Godflesh at first. People were a bit off a bit. Yeah, it's stuck. I thought he looked like we stuck a minute. But I was just raving about drum machines again anyway.
We loved drum machines at that stage. Yeah, because actually I got into things like Fast Eddie and Tyrene and Eric. You mentioned Eric B. and Rakim, didn't you, there as well?
That was it for me. That changed all for me. It really did. I've got to stand up a minute. I've got to. I remember my watch is telling me to stand up. It's that time exercise.
Oh, good.
Yeah. First Eric B. and Rakim album, first two actually, really, but first two Public Enemy, first Beastie Boys, first Run DMC, Boogie Down Productions, all that whole period of hip hop for me. After the Street Sounds thing and the British thing, the British emulation of it and all that sort of, I was obsessed with it all. But I didn't even really. It was obviously I couldn't even articulate it being a young kid again. But I was just obsessed with the drum machine sound. And it was just that everything having that, and that was it. It was just like, yes, drum machines for me. Do you know what I mean? It's like I knew we were drumming with Head David. It was like my drumming was so loose. I knew I had great drum ideas. Do you know what I mean? But we'd been in Head of David. It was like, I'm also writing guitar parts, writing bass parts, doing all my own drum parts, and have been a massive contribution to the whole writing thing. It was like, I just knew my drumming wasn't satisfying enough. It was too loose. I'm too much of a loose drummer. I'm too slow at everything. I can't absorb it. I'm not really a good drummer, but I've got great drumming ideas. You know what I mean? I thought, try kill it. Do you know what I mean? And armed with early Sisters of Mercy, fucking all these hip hop records, a love for things like trying to translate Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath drum beats into drum machine beats. You know what I mean? It was all this sort of stuff, really. So, and that was the thing, because people quite eventually rightly picked up with Godflesh is the machines have funk. There was, which is a cringe word these days, but it had groove. Do you know what I mean? And I would often program things with swing timing, which obviously in the hip hop records we're referencing, you had that. You had that fucking swing going all the time.
Yes.
I'm totally obsessed with that, And I was obsessed with sampling hip hop beats and bringing it into Godflesh, which was seen as pivotal at the time because people weren't doing that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, indeed.
And I hated that people thought it was, which eventually became a thing, and it was because it was also so conservative, so it's just like, oh, fucking hell. Power chords with a shit hip hop beat, you know what I mean, and so on, as opposed to something that's more dissonant or or just more expressive, just that an other world, and it's more about texture and more about the periphery as opposed to doing things conservatively or and da 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 da. But yeah, I could talk drum machine, the sound of drum machines all night.
Yes.
Actual drum machines. It don't excite me that much. Do you know what I mean? I preferred samplers because by the time we got sampling technology, that changed. It's like, yeah, this is it for me. Everything can be sampled there, and that's it. I can create a whole fucking album by just sampling all the parts. Do you know what I mean? Which is a good portion of what Godflesh is. You know what I mean?
So your 90s then. This was very much.
I do digress.
No, this is good. So it's very much the love of electronic music, Godflesh. This was a 10-year period which absolutely sort of focused on that sort of sonic sensation.
Sorry, David.
I know we were in. What room are we?
Sorry, you broke up then into.
To stutters, didn't I? Really? Yes. I was just saying about
that suddenly went. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, David. Try again.
Yes, I was saying the 90s, as we sort of left the 80s behind, but technology had moved on. So then that period, the next 10 years, this was very much your electronic, sonic kind of period, wasn't it, with Godflesh and various other sort of musical sort of avenues?
Yeah, nearly everything then became. I think once I embraced sample technology, which was something I knew I was even fascinated with, the concepts of, it changed everything. It absolutely changed everything again because from the ground up, fundamentally, everything. I then realised I could work with sound in that way and actually work with drum machines by resampling. Resampling, it became my thing, And then I started to get commissioned, for remixes where I'd resample. So nearly everything we Godflesh then started becoming resampling, you know what I mean? I'd just be sampling parts, writing parts, sampling them, and just make songs out of samples and still do. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Really, and was the Aphex Twin quite? I was going to say, was the Aphex Twin quite an influence on you at this stage?
Yeah, when I first heard Aphex, unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Early Aphex Twin. Yeah, still talk about it with mates when we first saw Aphex when nobody gave a fuck, when it was just like total punk. Do you know what I mean? Supporting Orbital. But he actually played after Orbital, I think this was 92 or something, 92, very early 93. Orbital played and everybody left. There's about 25 of us watching Aphex, like analog bubble bath stuff, do you know what I mean? In a fetus position on stage with a load of gear, with a guy with a skinhead and Dr. Martin boots, with straps on stage with him doing like punk rock dancing. It was so fucking punk. And it was just astonishing. Yeah, that changed again. That changed everything again, definitely. Early Aphex, definitely. Fucking hero. Yeah, I mean, that whole scene then, and once I started doing too much ecstasy, you know, once it was very drug fueled again for me. Everything was back then anyway. Anything to escape my default. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, I really embraced that. Embrace sampling technology. I mean, like Godflesh. You know, it was like I sampled an acid house anthem and made a song out of it. Do you know what I mean? Called Slave State, which was doing Strictly, which had become like a bit of a commercial success. So most bands would do that album and then be the clear, obvious thing to do is capitalise upon the importance of that album and the revenue from that album. Not that I don't remember seeing any, but the notoriety of that album by doing number 2. Instead, I sampled Stack of Humanoid, an acid house anthem, and made a Godflesh song out of that shit. Do you know what I mean? Which went down like a ton of shite. But but in doing so, it created something other. Do you know what I mean? And I do blame the at the time. Like I think ecstasy. By the time I embraced ecstasy and got over my magic mushroom period and got through the acid period, it was. Seemed like an MD, and to that was writing all this slave state material, and you know, and then started absorbing the whole early rave scene, you know, in 1990, 91, which was funny as well because you know, the label that first released that was actually I was into that stuff in '89 because Swordfish Records, the legendary Birmingham record shop that released the first Godflesh debut mini album, they also released the Ecstasy Club, who was a friend of ours at the time, which was one of the first ever UK acid tracks.
Right.
Jesus Loves the Acid, you know. Legendary fucking acid house anthem. And as soon as I was exposed to acid house, it was just like, oh man, I now want to weld this with Godflesh. Do you know what I mean? It was like, this is another sound, and the sound of a 303 was just so absolutely crazed, and once again so otherworld. It's weird, alien, squelchy, dirty, filthy fucking sound. It just communicated with me immediately, and I thought, I've got to have this. Do you know what I mean? This has got to be in this sound somehow. So yeah, and then sampling that sort of stuff, making songs out of it, then using the keyboard as and then started to sample guitars and bass, and then use the keyboard as to play bits of the songs and make new songs out of it, which is, it's like I said, I make music like that now. I've been making Godflesh albums like that ever since. I mean, this is what I do, you know. It's all about sampling technology, and I think people may sometimes potentially miss that with this music. Do you know what I mean? It's so much easier now as well. You know, this sort of technology is just, I just live and breathe this technology now. It's just, that's where I start with songs. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. But, so when did you decide, or how did you feel about sort of, you know, bringing Godflesh to an end and then starting the next part of your project in the years? Did you feel burnt out? Because you'd had some amazing commercial success with Godflesh during the 90s.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you know, Godflesh finished. That's a massive story in itself. But yeah, I mean, I then went into the whole Jesu thing, you know, and I mined that for a good 9 years without Godflesh even existing. And Jesu, again, as I was saying, is my purely melancholy outlet. Do you know what I mean? And also, again, loads of it made with sampling technology. So again, it is part electronic. I think what a lot of people don't know is, again, like Godflesh, that nearly most of it is made out of samples. Do you know what I mean? And most of it's made out of electronics. You know, that's getting to tying that in. But yeah, I mind the depressive melancholy thing as far as I could for a little bit. But that Jesu project is ongoing. You know, it's I'm on the new album at the minute. I'm starting the new album.
Well, yes, you just
about 6 weeks ago. I'm still working through that now.
So how did you navigate, you know, the combination of being a creative artist, your childhood, you know, the drugs, and then sort of just dealing with life just generally? How did that sort of start to sort of pan out? Because obviously you can keep it going for a while, but then there is a moment where things have to, I don't know, get serious, or you're at the crossroads, aren't you? You're either going to go for it and that's the end, or, you know, try and have a rebirth. How did that happen, or when did that happen?
Yeah, sorry, David. You actually broke up the first half of what you said. Then, approximately, completely broke up.
Right, that's all
sorry,
right.
but if you could
No,
repeat the first bit of the question.
I'll try. I'll try. Yeah. So I was just talking about that combination of the childhood, being a creative artist, making music. Not a normal life at all, as well as kind of the lifestyle with drugs and bits and pieces. How did you sort of then try and navigate out of that? Because if you hadn't, you would probably not be here today. So when does this start? When do you start to make those changes? That's what I was curious about.
I basically was a functioning alcoholic and quit booze about 2007, so that's a long time now.
Yes.
But when I quit the booze, I also quit touring in any duration, basically. If I spend more than a week performing, I fall to shit and I will turn to the bottle and drugs, basically, because I can't do it. It's entirely uncomfortable. So I knew then I had to make this decision because I was really ill through most of 2007 in a variety of ways, because I had done a lot of touring with Jesu.
Yes.
And they were tours that were like the old Godflesh tours. And I would just drink my way through them, I'd rarely go on stage where, if I wasn't drunk, then I couldn't be up there. So I'd either be like stoned out my mind and I couldn't even walk to the front of the stage and play at the back, or I would have to be absolutely leathered with booze, and then I could do what I needed to do. But, this was very, once I'd be back in my home and surrounded by my things and my environment and all my comfort things, I wouldn't need booze, I'd still drink each night because I was so used to that elevating my default state, but I would use more, I'd use drugs all day, cannabis all day, or and so on. I kicked ecstasy quite quickly, but I could have lived on ecstasy easy. Absolutely, I would have lived on the drug, because I think I was sort of I was actually dealing it for a while, and what I would deal with the profit I would just take. So I ended up, I think I worked out at one point that for a year and a half I did ecstasy 3 or 4 days a week, non-stop, for a year and a half. Obviously, when you come down from ecstasy would be absolutely brutal depression as well,
yes.
which I was also already familiar with, but around that period, though, when I was doing lots of ecstasy, alcohol was really shit with it. And I was doing it all at home, mostly, or sometimes would be maniacal enough to be at some sort of clubs, early acid house clubs and stuff like that. But, those environments felt quite safe then. But the streets didn't feel safe after it, but they came close to it. But ecstasy had that boost of confidence, it wasn't like that paranoia of fucking acid and everything. And the come down from ecstasy was one of the best experiences ever. Back in the early 90s when ecstasy was fantastic. But yeah, a lot of this, basically it all, by the time I was, I don't think I would have lived, if I would have continued on, I don't think I would have lived past 2010, 2011. I was drinking and I was falling apart and all manner of physical problems that I still carry now. But what it is I think really, I came through it. I was, what stopped me entirely drinking and then stopped me, even things like tobacco and all the rest of it, is when we had our son.
Right.
And I think that leveled me in a different way. That overwhelmed me in such a bizarre way that a lot of things took back seat, where I thought, well, I've just got to bring up a child here, and that's the only thing I can identify with and exist for now. So that changed my life entirely, in terms of also being more trying to attend to my needs. I'm clearly on cannabis products all day. I can't get up. I couldn't exist. I wouldn't sleep. I was an insomniac from an early, from a little kid. So, I need constant medicating, do you know what I mean? But I won't take the drugs that the Autism Society think I should take, like fucking beta blockers and all this. So I won't take this combination of stuff that it's meant to put me on an even keel. So the best thing I can do is remove myself from that side of the industry, So for years now, ever since, I just do either one-off shows, or if I have to do more than, if I go to America, which is absolute constantly distressing to me anyway. I'll make me feel like I'm either going to turn to the bottle or die. I'm counting the fucking hours, do you know what I mean? I'm like, I got to get out of this place. So it's still really painful, but it's necessary because it's the only income I've got, and I am incapable of doing anything else whatsoever. I do not function outside of music. So, you know what I mean? I can't do anything, basically. But I can fucking make an album a week, you know what I mean? If I ain't doing anything else. So, you know, so basically I've had to just find my way, and the way of doing that was not perform in any. I'm just, you know, just it's destructive. So yeah, so that's why I'm still here, really. But my physical body is a little bit fucked for it, you know.
Yes.
And also, I think if you spend your life shouting in a band, it's a good job I had 9 years off shouting, you know. But I'm going to be 56 this year, so I don't see my time. You know, Godflesh is reduced greatly in terms of shows, and physically, it's becoming somewhat impossible now. So that's extremely time limited, or you know, or very very. It's getting, you know, a great reduction of performing. I always said this to people anyway, that Jesu would be my age. As I climb the years, Jesu would be my keep mining the same melancholy bollocks with that. Do you know what I mean? The same boring album for people. I love the same boring record. You know, I'm a slow.
So on this, I'm sort of coming up.
You know, I like bands and artists that make the same record 100 times.
Yes. So with this, because your output has been prolific. So when did you decide to start your own record label, by the way? Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, that's a fucking nightmare as well. I'm almost just finished it. Yeah, you're back. Oh, have you lost me?
No, I've got you now. When did
you?
No, I'm back now. When did you decide to start your own record label? Was this 2007?
Oh Jesus, no! That label. I've had a number of record labels, but Avalanche Recordings was, I think, 2000. Yeah, 2000. But I had a number of labels. I had a HeadDirt Records. That was in 1992. Only for about 2 years, I think. I had Low Fibre, which was a minimal techno label, around 96. I think I've had another record label as well, to be honest. I lose track of my record labels as well. Yeah. But they're a necessary evil. But a record label is one of the most hideous things in the world, I think. It's absolutely disgusting. It was just, I love the idea, and I love having catalogue numbers. I'm so desperate to reach my 100. So what I've done, my record label's virtually not finished, but I'm refusing to release physical anymore. So I'm actually like selling all most of my projects to other record labels now. I'm not self-releasing anymore, apart from like small digital things and stuff, because I just can't do it.
So the bit that we were just on, hopefully, yeah. So you said that you had this record, the record label Avalanche, but you weren't going to release any more of your material through it. You were going to go through other record labels. Did I hear that right?
Okay, well, what it is, I'm just not going to release physical editions and distribute them. So I don't have to court that side of it anymore. I think, like I was saying, the ideation of a record label is amazing, but once I'm actually doing the record label, I despise it. It's absolutely foul. So what it is the big projects are going to go outside of my record label now, because I've been releasing most of it myself. You know, Godflesh and Jesu, particularly being the biggest ones, I've been releasing on Avalanche Recordings for years, you know. But now they're going to go outside now, because I just can't court that side of the industry anymore. I've just had enough of it. But I always do. But every record label I have, I jack. I always eventually think, this is disgusting, I hate this, and jack it in. And I've come to that conclusion again. I'm going to learn permanently from it this time. But I'm still releasing loads of stuff, just digital only, so I don't have to court the external world. That's what it is. I just don't want to engage in the external world with it. Going to other labels with it now. I've got for the last year, I've had a wonderful co-manager who has been has been an absolute dream for me to find someone who's very similar, who's not the classic sociopaths that the whole industry is full of. Highly sensitive, extremely understanding. Just a really, really amazing fellow who's who's all, he's also a paralegal, so he's very, very equipped. But he's been a godsend to me, and he's addressing a lot of this for me now, and almost become my shield to the shit that I've gullibly fallen into time and time again. So I feel quite equipped to go on with other labels now, knowing I'm protected. Do you know what I mean? It's like, am I still here?
Yes, you definitely are. So, because you've got this amazing catalogue and amazing archive, is there any? Do you ever sort of feel? I mean, I'm almost going to guess the answer here. Do you ever want to just have one fantastic, complete box set of all your work on different musical projects, or is that something that
there are a number of box sets existing, but in terms of being so all-encompassing, it would be wild, wouldn't it? Just in K Broadrick project box set, everything I've ever done in one. Jesus Christ, it could never be finished. I think it's almost one of them, and so it's like, I mean, it's like, I still say this to people now as well. It's like I'm 56 this year, but I still feel like I'm at the beginning of this music thing.
Well, it's interesting because did you ever get into those bands like Exmar Deutschland and sort of?
Oh yeah, Fetish Park, isn't it? That is it Fetish Park, the first album?
Yes, because the lead singer's just brought an album out this end of last year, with Mona Moore, who was co-wrote it and produced it, and a guy called John. God, that guy who was John Caffrey, I think, was the producer. Who was
John Caffrey? Yeah, I know that name.
So he'd done a lot of those German bands. He was in the UK, then he went over to Europe and stuff like that. And she's just released this album, which is just called Codes, which is, again, brilliant. It's just so well, it's just so well put together.
Wow.
They played a few shows, and I think they'll do some more shows. But she hadn't played music for decades. And, I mean, she's probably in her 60s. So I don't think there's ever a time when you go, no, there's nothing left in the tank.
Oh, my God.
Because there's always because, as you know, there's like David Bowie's Black Star, and I don't know if you heard the latest Cure album, but I kind of think there's lyrical genius if you listen to the thing from beginning to end.
There's some beautiful songs on that, but I know what you mean. It is a start to finish album. It's not an album. Yeah, I know what you mean. I've yet to digest it properly, that Cure album, because obviously their early records are some of my favourite records of all time. Like Faith is one of the albums of all time. But I had a whole period where I couldn't listen to them at all, But so ironically, somebody sent me a link to the first single off this new album and said, "Oh, check this out. It's a bit like Jesu. You might like it." And I would listen to it, and I was like, "Holy shit! It is actually a tiny bit like Jesu, yeah." So I've gone there, and I watched a BBC special, I think, a few weeks ago, where they were performing most of it live, and it was really quite beautiful, yeah.
Yes, it was it was stunning, actually, with Reed Gabrels on guitar.
Yeah, it was, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it was really, really, so I was like, oh, yeah, love this. Oh, my God, I don't question, Robert Smith's and the band, their creativity. You just think, that's a man who will be going, bless that he does, at 80, still making a record, you know what I mean? And it being resonant as well, it actually being meaningful and fucking, yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, there's no such thing to me like writer's block or these sort of things. I wouldn't know what that is. I have to block myself from making music. That's what it is. So I think I said this to you when we opened up. It's like I've got material that is like it's saturation. I know I can't drown people in my music. You know what I mean? Even if some of them want to be drowned in it. Because it's like I'm backed up, I've got 5 albums of this, 6 albums of that, and some days I just come in here and work exclusively on one thing, and then all week I'll work on even one song, and then some days I'll do an album in 3 days, and so on. Depends on the type of project and all this, but for me it's a never-ending it's a never-ending river of just creativity that I just it's all I think about, you know. My sort of all it's the ultimate distraction for me from just the default of feeling like shit as well. So it's like it's the only thing that transcends my default existence, you know, which is a really unpleasant feeling, really uncomfortable. So yeah, it's pure therapy. It's everything, you know. It's just like everything is music to me. I can't even, like, you know, there's a soundtrack to everything for me. Even the written word to me becomes quite meaningless unless it has sound. I even gave up on books eventually and fucking poetry and everything. I was just like, nah, it ain't me. It has to have sound. It has to have fucking sound. Like, lyrics can hit me like the fucking brick wall. But if that lyric didn't have that music, I'm not interested. It just wouldn't resonate with me whatsoever. And it's really part of my things, you know what I mean? So I hear sound all the time. Everything I'm walking, it's sound. Everything's got a soundtrack. Everything's like, yeah. So I don't see... the only time my music will end and my music creativity will end is when I end. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't see it past that. If my hearing went before that, then I would end anyway, because if my hearing finished, then I don't see the point in existence. So it's like, it's one thing that I absolutely dread is more just losing my hearing. So I treasure my hearing like you wouldn't believe. Now I really protect it, you know. So
yes, well, I think that's, I know, one looks at the body becomes quite of a like respectful kind of, wow. Yeah, just
like you were saying. Yeah, like you were saying when you opened up, you know, hitting 60 and suddenly being like, oh, is that ache for the rest of my life now? Oh, is that the rest of my life? I mean, it's like, my body's completely fucking broken down. And I was really, really, I fucking exercise as well. I'm doing everything, you know. And my son's an inspiration. He's 13 and a half years old and weightlifting. So quite the opposite. Yes. You know, it's ridiculous. The kid's lifting dead weights, you know what I mean? He's like, so I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So I've got an immediate inspiration in the house to keep me young. Do you know what I mean?
So looking at this year, you've released already one album, probably more on your label, which is this one, the album Dusk Dawn, which is kind of, that's one
that's another artist. That's Damien. That's Carthage. That's another artist. That is. I'm trying to think what of. He's a really good friend. And I really believe in his project, beautiful project. So that's me releasing. I release friends, even though I can't really be a real label, but that's also in collaboration with another label who they've done the heavy lifting, so to speak, a label called Give Take in the US. But I hope I've released something this year myself. I'm trying to think. Have I?
Because at the end of last year, you did the sort of a dub, was it Godflesh, A World Lit Only by Dub?
Yeah, that was the last. Yeah, that came out. I think that was December, actually.
December last year, yes, there you go. So then what have you got sort of, because you've got some live dates for Godflesh, haven't you, coming up?
Yeah, there's some one-offs, yeah.
Well, there's isn't there quite a few in Europe, a few in the UK, or one in the UK? And then are you going to America as well next year?
Oh, God, no.
No, this year.
No. No. The last time Godflesh was in America in 2023, we had 2 trips there, 2 very small mini tours, like I was saying. No, there's nothing on the cards for the US for any projects at the moment. No.
Oh, it's Sweden. You're off to Sweden soon, aren't you?
Yeah, close.
Wrong direction, really, wasn't it? And then I'm paying attention here. And then you've got a festival in July as well, which is headlining. So what's a typical Godflesh fan like? Is there a typical fan for the band?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I think, obviously, you know, Godflesh eventually settled fundamentally in the metal area, you know, really, which is really what it isn't. But I'd be an idiot to say that. Clearly, you know, Godflesh is a tool for reducing heavy metal, you know, it's like, you know, part of the intent. But I always saw Godflesh as a post-punk band, essentially, you know, coming from birth from that. But, you know, post-punk in the context of that band, post-punk bands would bastardize existing forms, so to speak. For me, you know, like the way Public Image Limited took dub reggae, or some may say these days appropriated, but they didn't. They made it discordant and fucked.
Yes.
And it gave it this other fucking life, you know, and injected it with dissonance and mood and other textures. And, you know, for me, Godflesh is the same. It operates, it abuses metal, it bastardizes metal. And that's what Head of David did as well, you know. It's using metal like the way it uses punk rock and stuff. It was never a metal band. But probably 50, well, I'd say maybe more, maybe a good 60% of Godflesh's audience is actually in the metal area, you know. But it's definitely people, I think, who operate on the periphery. You know, it's people like, but you know, you can be surprised sometimes. I can meet people who, you know, their two favourite bands is Iron Maiden and Godflesh, and you will be like, holy shit, that's a fucking unusuality, do you know what I mean? I didn't see that one coming. But fantastic if so, you know. But I think, you know, Godflesh is you know, it's a big name. But it's actually a very, very small band with a very small reach, you know. But it's got this huge name that's been referenced by, you know, giant killers, do you know what I mean? You know, like Metallica as fans and, you know, and so on. And all these bands, you know, Faith No More, Soundgarden, you know, you name it, like, you know, all these big fan clubs that existed for Godflesh that actually probably, you know, were partly catapulted the band into those audiences, you know. But, you know, Godflesh never ended up in arenas or even slightly, do you know what I mean? I think a glorified pub, you know, is about as good as we do, which is slightly wrong. But yeah, you know, it's somewhat idiosyncratic, to say the least, I like to say to people, do you know what I mean? So it's not for all. It's not for many. But those you do meet, they at least seem to have some sense of diversity to their tastes, you know. They themselves exist with, like you were saying yourself earlier, you know, this wide eclectic thing, you know, which, you know, for me is, like I said to you, I love millions of singular musics. So it's, you know, I love it all. So it's like I just live and breathe music. So I think you find a lot of people who enjoy Godflesh also are obsessional, you know. I think there's maybe it's a bit of that, do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yes.
you know, clearly I'm obsessive to the point of fucking, you know, of course it is. Of course I'm obsessive, beyond obsessive. Everything is obsessive to me. Everything has to be obsessive for me to enjoy it, you know what I mean? It's like, nothing is, you know, I don't just dip my toes in things. So, yeah, I think a Godflesh fan is, I like, you know, can be somewhat eclectic. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And recording wise, what's the next release you've got sort of, you're hoping to bring out? Anything this year?
Oh, Jesus Christ. I hope at least an album a month, I hope, or at least a release per month. I'm warming up. I thought I'd already had a couple this month. I'm disappointed that we've got to March. I think usually it's because, again, I'm just like, the Godflesh thing came out in December. I think I'm sitting on so much music that I just give people a little breather, do you know what I mean? And then I'm like, okay, now I'll hit them with this. I think next week, I don't know when you'll broadcast this could already have come out, but by the end of this week, I've always been in the drum and bass circles.
Yes.
I revitalised the project so that was active in drum and bass in the late 90s and the early 2000s. This project called Tech Level 2, not my name, given to me by a drum and bass label, actually, but just in case, bit cringe, but yeah. But that's got a new EP coming out this week. So there's my first one.
Excellent.
On Friday. Then I think I've got, I'm working on this new Jesu album that'll come out this year. I've got at least another maybe 3 final albums that should come out this year, I hope. If not, maybe 5. I've got a new album from an old project, which is a surprise one that's going to come out soon. I've got another project with my good friend Dermot Dalton, who also plays bass in Jesu sometimes, called Council Estate Electronics. That's coming out in about a month, I think. My God, I think I've got this other project called Exit Electronics. I've got a new one coming from that, with about another 5 sitting on the back burner that are virtually finished. I mean, no joke. I've just literally every project I've got at least 3 to 5 albums. I've got a new Godflesh album, but that's just I'm sitting on waiting for a deal at the minute before I put the finishing touches to that. I think last year I bought a guitar with a tremolo arm for the first time in ages. And I think I wrote even the next Godflesh album on that in 2 days.
Fantastic.
Particularly inspired. So I've got that one on the back burner. So it's like, oh my God, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, you know. This is a 10% of what I've got coming.
Fantastic. And for those who this isn't all going to be on Bandcamp, is Facebook the place to see what you're releasing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean that's my social media evil necessity platform more so than because I can not engage. I can just release and not have to engage in the social media game, which I find like vomit. I tried for a bit, but it's hideous. I despise social media, but yeah, so but Facebook is the best place for me to just put things up. I find I can put up a release and just go, there you go, and I don't have to read painful comments or engage. I can turn comments off. Yes. Instagram I use as well, but I don't. That's another page. Suffocating.
Yes, but no, one can do it. I mean, if you were able to just whisper something to your 16-year-old self, you know, just. Is there anything, you know, because you've had a hell of a lot of experiences and a lot of kind of emotional sort of ups and downs. Is there anything in particular that you might have just sort of whispered to them, even if they kind of ignored it?
Too much to even divulge now, I think. I think ultimately it would have been quite negative, to be really honest. I think it would have been like, keep making an album every week, but like this music industry ain't a good place. This is going to harm you. This is going to badly harm you. It's full of fucking sociopaths. You will be objectified and you will be fucking taken for an absolute cunt. You will have the absolute advantage taken out of you. You will not... Being gullible and just wanting to do your music and follow your obsessions is going to be bad fucking news. I often say this to my son. Like, people say to me, God, is your son going to follow in your footsteps? I'm like, I hope not. My son loves music, but he's not developed enough. But he sees my studio about once every 3 months. You know what I mean? And I always say to him, don't do, you know. He's into he's obsessional, but he's like, he likes building PCs now, and he likes he made a VR game and made a load of money out of it in about once, which was ridiculous, when he was like 11 and a half. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So he knows how to apply himself, and he knows how to be obsessional. He's not as far gone as me, thank God. He doesn't actually have autism, but he's definitely he's got elements of it for sure, but he's not stricken. He's got my partner's rather advanced, very clean genes instead, I think, as well, which unfortunately. But it'd be quite sad, really. I think if I spoke to myself at that age, because I think you know, this is brilliant. You're going to do what you have been doing, and people are actually going to buy it. You're not just going to be making an album a week and be 11 years old and no one cares. Yes. You're actually going to be making an album and selling even hundreds of thousands of these things at some point. But you're going to court an industry which is disgusting. It's going to be disgusting. You're going to have a really, really bad time. Really sorry, but that's the price of making this music. And that's what I would say to myself.
I know this is yeah. I know this is. And what? I'm just curious. What happened to your?
It's a bit negative, sorry, but
it's a bit but yeah, most people have slightly similar comments. What happened to your mum and your stepdad and dad? What happened to them in the end? Kind of curious. Kind of after their kind of hedonistic kind of 70s and 80s. Did they?
Yeah. Quite crazy. I mean. The day I left home, my mom left my stepdad, Rob, who was the guitarist, basically, and that was the end of her being involved in anything musical like that whatsoever. So that was the end of that trajectory. My stepdad, Rob, then hooked up with someone else, and he moved to South Wales, and I've never seen him since I was 21. Right. I ironically met my real dad around the age of 21, who had now... got, clearly got well over the heroin addiction, but was definitely an alcoholic, is the familiar trajectory, but also a very capable, skilled man who had become eventually, and now he's he's retired now, he's only just retired, but became a very successful financial advisor, and has a big home and a lot of money, and never ended up with any other kids, and has a very, very nice lifestyle with his wife, and all good. My mum is still the same council estate maniac. I think that I haven't spoken to her now for 4 years. I never saw my stepdad again, unfortunately, which is quite sad because I wouldn't have played guitar if it wasn't for him, really. And he was. It was his equipment and his. I mean, he barely spoke, to be honest. The only time he was fucking hilarious when he was drunk, but he barely spoke. Besides that, apart from saving me from a few severe beatings, which I'm be ever grateful for. But lovely, very clearly sensitive man. Beautiful musician. What a shame he never made any real music. He just carried on around fucking social clubs and British Legions. Do you know what I mean? But
Yes.
his guitar heroes were Jimi Hendrix and Dave Gilmour, and he fucking played like them, He was stunning. He was a stunning lead guitarist. And he knew what to do with it. He knew what to do with feedback and stuff like that. He was a definite inspiration, because Jimi Hendrix, for me, was a big influence, And I took that directly from Rob, It was him playing the Strat. Rob played the Strat, and he played Jimi Hendrix, And I took that directly from him. Hendrix was a big influence on my guitar playing, and the Strat I played, I'm known for playing a Stratocaster in Godflesh, and that all came from Rob, and he came from Jimi Hendrix, because for me that was the first guitarist that I heard where texture was as important as the content, and that electricity and fire and sound was just something that you just saw guitar suddenly as an instrument of a fucking weapon.
Yes.
Not, it can be approached without a rule book, basically, and you can make things otherworldly come from this instrument, you know what I mean?
Amazing. God, well, look, God, we've been a long time, actually. But this has been amazing. Thank you ever so much for this, Justin, because we've been...
Really enjoyable, David.
Yes, no, it's been an amazing insight to your incredible career, life, creativity. Well, more...
From my as people say to me, talking to me, it's just the flow of consciousness.
Well, no, it all makes sense. I followed it, and it was all making sense. It's amazing. I had no idea, by the way, some of the backstory to all this. So, but no, it's been incredible. So, thank you ever so much. And if you want, I can always send you the link, and you can always use it on any of your social media sites and stuff like that. So,
Jesus! This is the first interview I've done in about out of choice as well in about 9 months. I generally don't do interviews anymore for a few reasons I think I covered in an email to you. But I felt I really wanted to honour this, and I knew it would be good, and it was really great. But a lot of people, I think, are wanting to hear me say something for many months, I think. So I immediately, please send me the link when you go. I'll put it everywhere. I really enjoyed this. I really want people to hear it. So
yes,
I'll share it far and wide.
Oh, well, look, that's amazing. Well, look, take care of yourself. I hope you have a nice week, and looking forward to the next release. I'll be keeping an eye out. But anyway, look, take care again.
Well, sorry, Dave, just before you go, but when are you thinking of posting? You edit this down, I assume, don't you?
Yeah, a little bit in places, but people like the whole story. I'll take out the 1 or 2 bits of the when the reception breaks up, but hopefully I'll do it sooner than later, like over the weekend, because otherwise, things get a bit sort of lost down the line, and time moves on, and suddenly it's the spring equinox, and
yeah.
Yes, all that kind of malarkey. But look, thank you ever so much. But I'll keep in touch, and thanks for this time.
I can't wait to share it, David. You take care. Thank you very much.
Take care. Look.
Bye, David.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye. I know, dear listener, I just, I quite like those last little bits of us saying goodbye, farewell. It's emotional, and yes, it's nice. Anyway, a massive thank you to Justin for giving me the time for that. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh, if you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites, just do C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, and I'll also put various links to Justin's Facebook, and also Bandcamp page as well in the notes below. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.